I want to speak about BMX. My name is Axel, and from the last talk I've learned that technical details can be a bit overloading the people, so today I want to take it another way. And well, let's start straight. I'm coming from the Batman routing protocol team, and Batman is formed into BMX Demon. And after this was all going fine, I came across new ideas, and one day I thought, like probably many other developers do from time to time, this must be all done different. And so this was a time, or maybe 1 year later, I started to implement a new version with my new ideas. Yeah. As mentioned, there will be no technical details inside, so you might think now and then that, wow, how can this be solved, how this is done? I'm happy to discuss details with you afterwards, but now I'm just giving a very high layer overview of some concepts. Yeah, and while thinking about how things should be done, I thought a lot of how human beings communicate with their neighbors and their peers and how they get information. And so I want to start a bit with human and social networks. If we look at real life, like look at our world, we have a world population of maybe 6 billion. And, but in fact I only spent maybe 99%, well I spent the most time, 99%, but with a very, very low fraction of this population. So it should be something about 0.0001%. And in fact, I spent even more of my lifetime, more than 99%, with an even much smaller subset of these few people that are left. And yeah, last but not least, I spent all my life concerned with myself and dealing with myself. So the node itself, or I as a person, that's important to deal with it and not to forget about yourself. And this has some advantages. Well, as already recognized, we deal with most of the time with our friends and our neighbors. And we know them very well, we know their weaknesses, and we know their strengths, and we also know their friends. They don't have to explain me all the time, oh, I'm talking about Pete, and Pete is living in Brussels, and Brussels is somewhere there in Europe, and he has these and these neighbors, because I know him already. It's very easy, and I can ask him some embarrassing questions, because I know him, and I have some trust, and there's an easy communication with my friends. But with the rest of the world, with most of the other people, there's a very difficult communication, or no communication at all. And it goes even further. I think with your friends, you can expect some tolerance in front of you, and they accept the way you do things, even if they are a little bit strange. And there's also one negative side, maybe, because if you stay in a small community, it's also narrowing your mind a bit. If the community is too small, you go maybe like this, and you don't know, you miss many important points in the world. But on the other hand, this is what prevents you from like a denial of service. You don't have to process too much information if you only deal with a few people, and if these few people explain the world to you. So next slide, the similarities with a mesh network. I think there are many similarities. First one is that the neighbors, or yeah, the neighbors I have as a node, they are pretty much limited compared to the total number of nodes in the network. And especially the number of good neighbors are very few. That's the same as in human life, as already mentioned. And another aspect is that good neighbors are usually not related to geographically close persons. You can imagine you live in a skyscraper or in a metropolitan city, and often people don't know their real neighbors, those people who are living next door. But they have friends well, somewhere else, in another district, another street. There's another thing, I believe, in human societies, that a common prosperity doesn't come without some social measures. We have a social system, we help a bit each other, the poor or the weak people. And I think the same is true for a meshnet node. We have some nodes which are just weak, they are somehow apart, they have very weak links. And it's good if other nodes are aware of this and invest some more efforts to help them to get connected to the network. Because for a mesh network, I assume prosperity if all nodes can be served with a minimum connectivity to the whole network. And yeah, there's another point in human society that we have different opinions and objectives for our life. And often these are situation dependent. One day I want to go like this, the other like this. And of course, when we talk about mesh networks, this is about routing. We want to forward information, and maybe some nodes or some administrators of a node want to do the routing different than others. It's about there are aspects like speed, reliability, or the range. However, or depending on your policies, the personal policies of the user or of the administrator of a node, you would like to choose a good routing algorithm for your objectives. So I try to map this a bit to the aspects I had in mind when I was designing this new version of BMX. And the first point is about being egoistic. I mentioned this. I have to deal with myself so my whole life until I'm dead, and I don't have to care about it anymore. Then there's something regarding social behavior within my neighborhood, because I have to deal with pretty much the same neighbors most of the time. They don't change as often as, well, usually they don't change as often, so often. And the last point is about the tolerance, but we come to this later. So looking at the social being egoistic. Why is BMX egoistic? First point, this is probably the same for all routing protocols. Of course, in your code, you try to optimize data structures and how you process stuff. And BMX even goes a little bit further, I guess, because it's inventing its own identifiers and vocabularies for all these complex contexts like IP addresses and host names and stuff like this. It's just renaming all the data structures so that it makes most sense for himself. I think that's fine, usually, as long as you keep this for yourself. But here, BMX goes a bit further, and even when it talks to the neighborhood, it's using its own identifiers. It's using its own vocabulary to speak about the world. This is strange, and you, of course, you think, how should that work? So when a BMX daemon speaks to neighbors, he's not talking about Pete living in Brussels, in this capital, and in this street. He just calls him 5. It has an advantage because 5 is much shorter than talking about all the other details. But if you do this, okay. I have a first, some. On the first slide, next slide, I mean this one, I made the first small performance measurement. Actually, this graph is a bit fucked up. That's a pity. But I think anyway, I can try to explain it. It is a measurement about the CPU load, which is caused by a node. I measured this on a Fonera, like we have here, and I looked at how much the CPU load increases if we increase the total size of the network. And so I have here a column, a line with nodes. I tested with 1, 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100 nodes. And on the bottom line, I have the average CPU load. And it turned out that the CPU load does not increase pretty fast. So it's just let's say a first proof of concept that this egoistic way of processing information internally works out, does not fail in use. I want to come to the next point, the social aspect. I think, well, the social aspect starts immediately when you want to talk with another neighbor. He's using his own language, his own identifiers, which you don't know. So you have to accept he's talking another language. He's maybe talking the same grammar, but he's using identifiers you've never heard. And I skipped a slide here. Yeah, I'm talking about this slide. I'm talking about behavior within my neighborhood, and that I have to learn, accept that my neighbors speak another language. I have to learn it, so I have to make some efforts to get this vocabulary. And but afterwards, once I understood the vocabulary of my neighbors, it makes sense for me because this vocabulary is optimized. It's perfectly optimized in the sense of my neighbor, and because I assume him to do rational decisions and optimizing it well, it also works out for me. So afterwards we both benefit from it in terms of protocol traffic overhead, because all the information he's giving me, they are perfectly compressed, and also the processing inside. I want to mention here that in research this is called like stateful compression, because you have like a small negotiation about how to summarize a rather complex context into just a short identifier. I also here have some CPU load on protocol traffic, also protocol traffic measurements. These are the CPU load measurements. Similar to the previous measurements, here I measured also the CPU load, but now I have a fixed number of nodes. I measured 100 nodes all the time, but I have changed the number of neighbors in node-less. It's again on a phonera. This is what's this blue word. I have varying numbers of neighbors, 2, 4, 6, 8 in this upper table, and I have on the bottom the average CPU load. And you see it increases with the number of neighbors. That makes sense because the more neighbors I have, the more vocabularies I have to learn, and have to keep track of it. But it's I think it's still reasonable. It's not too much. Here, the first with 10 nodes, the number gets up to 5% CPU load for this node. And here in the bottom table, I increase the number of nodes even further. I have like 10 nodes. This is pretty much the same. The numbers are pretty much the same as here. I have 20 nodes and 30 nodes. So having 30 neighbors in a mesh network is already quite a number. If you consider a GifiNet topology, you have usually not more than 4 or 5 neighbors for a supernode, because we use one radio for each neighbor. So if you have a board with 4 radios and with 4 directive links to other neighbors, then this is already quite much more than than I've tried to measure here. But in a mesh network, this can happen. Another difference here is that in the upper slide I had 2 or up to 10 perfect neighbors. I all saw them with no packet loss. If I have neighbors with varying packet loss, with varying link qualities, then the daemon or the neighbors starts to talk about who really needs help and who already has other good neighbors, so I don't have to help him anymore. And as we can see here, also the average CPU load it increases the more neighbors I have, but it stays within something that can be handled even by Phonera. On the next slide, I made some protocol traffic measurements. It's once again, now it's a 60 nodes mesh network. You can consider it a bit like illustrated here on this table. I have a grid with 10 nodes times 6 nodes. They have this number of neighbors, 8 altogether. If I'm this node, for example, I have these 8 neighbors. So I have also 8 links. Then I have good links to these which are on the right and on the top and on the bottom. They have 80% success rate or link quality of 80%. And I have these diagonal neighbors in my emulation or measurements which have a weaker link quality. Here it's 66%. What's more, I used IPv4 for the measurement, and each node also has 2 radios for 2 interfaces. And this is the result. You see, it's just the measurement of the protocol traffic overhead over the time. At this point, I'm starting all the nodes. So they get up, for any reason, at the same moment. 60 nodes. And the green line represents the BMX, the protocol traffic overhead of BMX. So it has a discovery phase, because first it doesn't know the neighbors, it doesn't know their vocabulary. It has to ask them, who do you mean with this, what do you mean with that? But after a short period of time, this is all learned, and the protocol traffic overhead stays pretty much constant and also on quite a low level. Also, it's quite aggressive. It's going up pretty fast. The opposite happens with OLSR. OLSR is slowly, well, probably other people can better explain why it behaves exactly like this, but it's a slow startup procedure in the beginning, and this is also, I think, because the MID and interface information, they are not propagated. They're not sent as often as topology control information. And also, I think they are sent with this raising horizon TTL.
Only the TCs.
Okay, only the TCs. But anyway, in the end it turns out that it starts slowly, and once it has it comes to a certain level, the average level would be somewhere like here, and it maintains this level. I've done the same measurements also with weaker links, so with mesh networks that have a much worse link quality. And I think it's also interesting to discuss it a bit. Here we have 50% packet loss on the good links, and only 33% success rate, or let's say 37% packet loss on the weak links. And we can already see that the effort which is needed to negotiate with the neighbors, all their vocabulary, and to learn about them, it increases. Also later on, this constant level which is needed to continuously maintain all the links is a bit higher than before. Like if we go back and forth, you see that the green line is increasing. In fact, it's a bit difficult to see here because this is so much going up and down. But
you should have averaged over.
I should have averaged, yeah. But I have not, or at least not in the slides. But if you average it, I know that then the OLSR protocol traffic overhead is even going a bit down. I think it makes sense because more packets are getting lost and some information is getting lost, and it's decreasing while this is increasing. This is because the nodes know their neighbors, they recognize if some information has not gone through, and they repeat it. It's a bit like an acknowledgement system. So it causes them more effort to get the information to, and to make sure that everybody is happy. And even I have a much even worse case, like the good links already have 66% packet loss. You see the effort in the beginning is getting even higher, and also the traffic which is needed to maintain it becomes equal. But I think one can also say that such a mesh network is pretty much unrealistic, because you usually don't want to have a mesh network with 66% packet loss. It might become interesting if we talk about, well, really dense areas and you have a mesh network in or maybe a sensor network or something like this, which is located in a big chaos with lots of interference. But usually in our mesh networks this is not desirable, so usually we don't have it. I have another slide which is coming back to the good links again, and it's about IPv6. And IPv6 was one of the reasons why I considered this all, because with IPv6 I thought, hey, this is so long addresses, so much information, we have to transmit again and again, although it's usually not changing, so this could be optimized. And here you see the real benefits of the approach. You recognize that even during the discovery phase we need less protocol traffic overhead than OSR is using constantly all the time. And afterwards it's going down to a fraction of this, and this is enough to maintain the network. So the only thing I've changed here is switching from IPv4 to IPv6. And yeah, one could also mention that even these link qualities, like 80% success rate, is not very good. If you have a mesh network with 90 or 100% links, then this line will even be a bit lower. Okay, so we are still talking about these, well, that makes sense to be a bit social and to have some overhead and to be a bit heuristic. Now I want to have some more points here. It's about the weaknesses and the strengths and the reliability. We've already addressed it a bit before, like if links are very bad, I'm aware of this, that my neighbor is not getting the information and I'm helping him, I'm repeating it. There are other things that the demons learn, like the willingness of my neighbors to quickly forward my information, or maybe he's not willing to do that, and also whether it's useful for me at all to deal with him. Maybe I have much better neighbors, really good neighbors, so I don't have to deal with a weak neighbor. He also has good neighbors, so we can just ignore each other, we would be happy anyway. Maybe I need him, or he needs me. I've done another measurement, and I want to discuss. Oh, it's getting worse.
It looks like it's just a curve.
Yeah, that's a pity. I'm not sure, maybe it's even easier to read here than on the other graph. I think so, huh? What I've done is I used a 40 nodes mesh network. You can consider it like it's illustrated on this table. So it goes here to here. It's just a fraction of the previous one. And the nodes are numbered, like it's going from 100, 101, blah, 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 109 in the end. Then we still have the next row, 110, 120, 130, and the last node is 139. And what I did here, I sent ping probes between the 112, so it's this node, to the 104, no, to the 128. So to this node, no, to this node. So both protocols, OSR and BMX, are supposed to find a way through the mesh. So it should go somehow this direction and end up here and go back. But then, from time to time, I enabled like a direct link, as you could imagine in a mesh network. You make a shortcut, and the shortcut goes from 100 to 149. So from this edge here, 139, that's wrong. So from time to time it was possible to go with no packet loss straight from here to there. And of course the mesh protocol is supposed to find out about this very good link and it should be used. So I sent 500 pings. Every 100 seconds I changed the conditions. After 100 seconds, or 100, and after 102 pings actually, to be precise, I switched this link on. So it went from 0% packet loss, from 100% packet loss to 0, or the success rate changed from 0 to 100%. And I observed in this case that OSR took 33 seconds to find this new path, and BMX took 20. Then 200 seconds later, 100 seconds later, after 200 seconds altogether, I disabled this shortcut again. Link quality went down. I observed 11 losses, so it took about 11 seconds until BMX recognized this. With OSR, it's a bit typical, I guess, for link stage algorithms. It took a while, then it started to cause some loops, and you will see some TTL exceeded messages, and then in the end, 27 seconds later, it recovered the path, the old path, and everything went fine again. I repeated the same again, 100 seconds later. It turned out to be more or less the same. So also here I see, yeah, what can I say? It works.
You want an explanation roughly what happened at this point?
Sorry?
Do you want that I explain to you just why OSR did this?
Yeah.
Because I think after some looking, I understand what happened.
I think we have some time, yeah. If you can.
The first problem is that this is roughly the worst case what can happen for the ETX metric as we do it. We don't get any information, at a certain point we don't get any information anymore from the other side. So we cannot guess how good is the range, and we just have to wait until timeout is running out. And most likely this 27 seconds is the interval until the metric, which default averages over a period of 64 seconds, I think, takes into account, okay, the link is gone, just remove it. And the TTL most likely the loop is similar, that's roughly 1 or 2 TCE package intervals. So in addition to this, because at the moment OSR does not do some TC on the fly, it just takes at least one topology control interval to transmit the new information to the rest of the network, most likely more than one. So I think that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Maybe we had a chance to look at this and also repeat the measurement. With the new version you've seen, you've been coding on. And sure, that's interesting. That's why we are here. But for me, OSR was a reference because it's somehow the most stable and most used protocol.
And the interesting thing is that's the same version as last year in the mesh, so we can really see how the BMX code has become better because OSR stayed constant during this period of time. There's no real advantage in the algorithms. And last time was better than BMX, and now BMX made a huge step ahead.
Yeah.
Where's the 5 seconds difference coming from? It goes up from 20 seconds to 25 seconds. It's quite a jump, 25% slower.
Sorry? Well,
BMX6 needs 20 seconds and then 25 seconds, the second attempt.
yeah, that's random. Because by default it's sending voting updates every 5 seconds. It's investing lots of efforts to make sure they go through, how bad the link is, if it's needed. But, so if, for example, if these, what I could imagine, that the switch, this was turned off, just happened after update was sent, maybe, or something like this, then you have these tolerances. Yeah, but I'm surprised that OLSR took pretty much always, well, took exactly the same amount of seconds to recover in both cases actually. Yeah? 32, 27, 32, 27. Well, it's just one measurement, so if you make many measurements, maybe there are other results. And it's a virtualization, it's not a real mesh network, so I'm eager to see what comes out of the next days. No title. Yeah, so after all, I think that this idea to be a bit social, to invest some efforts into my neighbors makes sense. I have to deal with the same neighbors most of the time, so why not? There's the last point regarding tolerance within the mesh cloud. I have not prepared this visually in the slides, but I think we have the time to briefly illustrate it on the board. Just first some words about it. I mentioned already in a mesh network, in the end it's about routing objectives. The user or the administrator, they are, let's consider a user, he has a smartphone running a mesh protocol on it. Sometimes he's at home, he wants to have a reliable link that is very fast. And because he's not moving, he doesn't care about the fast convergence time. In another scenario, he's maybe on the road. He would like to choose another routing algorithm because simply on the road, then constantly changing neighbors and things are going up and down. So I don't care so much about whether it's perfectly fast and reliable, but it should be there. And you might think of something, now I want to use TQ, which is the metric algorithm we used to have in Batman, or maybe you want to use ETX or another combination of it or whatever. And BMX has some different algorithms implemented. For example, it can emulate ETX or TQ or some other variations. It has an approach towards ETQ, but this is not finished. There's some link information missing. But the fact is, a node can choose the algorithm according to which data should be routed to him. So I assume every data, every packet which is sent to the network, it's the property of the destination address. And the destination address or node can specify the algorithm according to which it should be routed to him. And so what needs to be done is that nodes learn about the desired routing algorithm of all the other nodes and also their parameterization. And they have to treat each node's packet respectively. And after all, they should not break up the global routing. It should continue to work. And here I don't have. Yeah, let's go back. As mentioned, I'm not going to go into the details today, but I just want to stress this possibility. And I also think for mesh networks, it's probably the only way to play with new algorithms. Because we know from the OLSR networks, we can only, there might be a metric plugin which supports a new algorithm, but it only works in the end if all the nodes do this at the same time. If they do it at different times, there's some chaos in the link state calculations, and we will end up with some chaos. But if just two nodes in a whole community decide at the same time, hey, let's test this algorithm, and these two nodes are configured on the fly to select this algorithm, so the packet will go back and forth choosing the specific algorithm, and you can make tests, you can see if it works better than before or if it's worse. What I wanted to prepare is a very simple scenario where you have a ring, let's say 5 nodes, they are connected like this, and they have very asymmetric links. So in this direction, it's perfect. I have 100% success rate. But in the other direction, it's not so good. It's, let's say, 60% packet loss. If I use ETX and want to ping from this node to this node, the packet will always go this way and back. Because ETX doesn't consider asymmetric links, we will just assume altogether this link has 40% packet loss. The same is for this link. So here I have 2 hops compared to 3 hops, each having 40% packet loss. Of course I take this way. But if you consider the TQ metric, which is considering the transmission direction, the packet loss in the direction I want to transmit a packet much stronger than the received direction, then the protocol knows, okay, here I have 100% and 100%, there's no packet loss, so it should go this way. And there are benefits. There's less packet loss and it pays out. And yeah, this works, but I cannot, could have only shown you it like this. If you are more interested in some experiments, also all the results I've shown, I'm happy to show you more details or to discuss with you what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. Yeah, I'm actually finished. This tolerance thing I consider as pluralism. I like it in societies, and I think it's good for mesh networks, and that's it. Any questions? Okay.